From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's ahead. K-State's Mike Stamm talks about how the canola crop is doing in Kansas at present, and he'll tell us about the significant advances in canola varieties and hybrids. Those will be on display at a K-State Canola Field Day tomorrow. Then from the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen is back, this time to take a look at the latest tax policy proposal now circulating in Congress and its potential consequences for farm and ranch income and estate tax planning. Also, we'll have results from the Kansas FFA Career Development Events in Agriculture, which just wrapped up here on the K-State campus, and K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven with another Stop, Look, and Listen, right here on Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
You're listening to Agriculture Today. Welcome. Now for you on this segment, a look at the state of the canola crop in Kansas, which has gone through its paces here in recent weeks and months. And we're previewing along with that a special field day coming up in south central Kansas, which will display some of K-State's advances in canola breeding. Joining us now is K-State canola agronomist Mike Stamm. Well, Mike, to the condition of canola in Kansas, and it parallels that of wheat in terms of what it goes through. And so are you seeing similar effects of the last couple of months on canola as we've seen with wheat?
Eric, I'd say the canola crop's actually in really good shape for the spring that we've had. Think back to snow, 3 weeks ago
Yeah, right.
on a flowering crop and some temperatures below freezing at the flowering stage, which is not uncommon anymore. It seems like almost every year we have a hard freeze during the reproductive period of the crop. But with canolas and determinants, from what I've seen so far, it really handled that April freeze really well. Really didn't skip a beat. We had a little bit of warm weather just a few days afterward, and so right now you really can't tell any negative effects from that event.
You would anticipate then that there will not be a yield ding to speak of on canola coming through that? Hard to make that call understood.
Yeah,
but
it is, and part of the reason is we've had so much cool weather lately that it's really extended the bloom on this crop, more so than I've seen in several years now. And that's a good thing. Again, it promotes more flowering, more branching, more buds. So I'm going to guess that the hard freeze that we had here a few weeks ago is really going to have very little impact this year on the crop, less than what we've seen in previous years. And you can attribute that, I think, a lot to this cooler weather and just prolonging this reproductive period.
And as you speak about that, prolonging the season actually will benefit this crop.
I think so. It gives it, again, just more opportunity to add buds and flowers and pods. Typically, we see bigger pods when we have cool weather as well. Just more seeds, better fertilization at flowering. And so I'm anxious to see what the yields are going to be. Canola really doesn't like heat. It would prefer it to be cool during this critical time of year. And in some places, we've been getting moisture along with that. And so I think those two factors, the moisture and these cooler temperatures, are going to help things.
What, if anything, then, Mike, do you see as the primary challenges for the crop moving ahead?
Challenges, we could have some insect pressures here at the tail end of flowering. Primarily the cabbage aphid can come in and feed on opening flowers and on pods. But I really haven't seen a lot of insect pressure this year, and maybe we can attribute some of that to the really cold temperatures that we had in February. And temperatures, again, have been cool. We haven't had these really long spells of warmer weather. So I'm not anticipating any major problems with insects, but it's always something to kind of keep an eye on, especially this critical time of year.
Well, energizing the canola scene, what is happening in the market. Not unlike other grains, canola prices are more than a little healthy right now.
You're right, Eric. The market has certainly changed, and canola price has really followed other commodities now. We're talking $12 or $13 a bushel at canola right now. So for the guys that have the crop, I know they're very anxious to get it out of the field. Moving forward, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the 2022 crop in terms of price. But definitely encourage growers to be talking to their marketers right now and locking in some prices, because it's something that we haven't seen in a long time. So I know the guys that have canola are really anxious.
And it could be encouraging looking to this coming fall. If the market doesn't completely fall off the table, then the incentive economically very well may still be there.
Yeah, we really hope so. If these prices could stick around till next fall, we'll hopefully have a bump up in planted acres. And I know that's been an issue lately is commodity prices have really kind of drugged the alternative crops down somewhat. And so I'm encouraged for the future, but the prices are certainly going to help.
Tell us about this field day coming up, and it'll take place tomorrow, the 13th, in south central Kansas, Kingman County to be exact. What's going to be on display there, Mike?
We're going to talk varieties primarily, and I'm excited about this opportunity to share some of the advancements that we've made, because we've had several variety releases over the past 3 to 4 years, and we really haven't had a good opportunity to talk about them. This will be the first field day that we've had since 2018. 2019 we canceled because of all the rain we had in May, and last year, of course, was taken off the books because of COVID. So we really have an awesome opportunity to showcase some of the new variety releases out of the program. We'll be talking 3 or 4 of those variety releases, as well as some of the things that are going on with our hybrid parent line development program. And this is one of the projects that I'm most excited about that I've been involved with since I've taken over the reins of the canola breeding program. We've had as a goal for a number of years to develop parent lines for hybrids that are specifically adapted to our climatic conditions here in Kansas and the southern Great Plains. And we're now to a point where we can test some of these parent lines in a hybrid combination and then see how those hybrids perform. And so one of our hybrid variety trials is planted at this location, so we'll talk more about that specific project, some of the traits that could potentially come along with these hybrids as they may be introduced here in the Southern Plains. There's just a lot of great things I think that can come from this particular project because it's been needed for a number of years.
You might quickly refer to some of the attributes of these new hybrids as well as the varieties that you are working on. Superior yields, of course, but what else might be in there?
Certainly. So winter hardiness, of course, is one of our top traits. And all of the varieties that we've released here recently have exceptional winter hardiness. And I think we've even extended that from some of the more common releases that we've grown for checks for a number of years. A variety Wichita comes to mind. Well, we've got varieties now that have advantages in winter survival over Wichita. So we'll talk about the winter hardiness trait and how that certainly benefited us this winter with the bitterly cold temperatures that we had. We'll talk about lodging tolerance, which is an important trait. I think it's a trait that's grown in importance in my time in working with canola because we've had some wet springs here recently, and we've had growers lose entire crops because the crop fell over in the field and it wasn't harvestable. And I hate to see that happen, especially a producer that's growing one of our varieties. And so we have a new variety release that has improved lodging tolerance. I really think that's a critical trait moving forward. Several of the hybrids that we see commercially now have similar lodging tolerance, and so we should be on par with hybrids in terms of lodging tolerance with this specific variety. Another attribute about this specific variety is that it has improved pod shattering tolerance as well, which is something that I haven't been able to say before with one of our lines. So lots of attributes kind of coming together finally in some of these varieties, and so I hope that sparks some interest again in canola.
A ton of positives to talk about there. Plus, you'll be discussing harvest management options with producers as we move ever so steadily toward that time.
Yeah, we're kind of moving into snail's pace right now towards
right.
Harvest, but it's always good to have those reminders because it's certainly a crop that has more intensive management of harvest than what wheat does. So we just got to be prepared, like we always say.
And there will be opportunity for you producers to bring questions to Mike's attention. If you could share some details on the field day, Mike.
I would just want to say RSVP by May 12th because we'll have some sandwiches available after the event. And please come on out. A really excellent plot, and the field around it looks very good as well. So very excited about showcasing it.
Excellent. It'll take place south of Norwich in Kingman County, starting at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. No cost to take part. A lunch will be provided, but you do need to, as Mike says, RSVP by the end of the business day today. In closing, Mike, it's sounding like it's going to be a nice turnaround for canola in Kansas this year.
I really hope so. I think the improvement in price and then some success with harvest will go a long way to generating some more enthusiasm for the crop because I still think we really need it in our rotations, and I know there's farmers out there that want to grow it, but a few things have to fall into place for them to consider it again. And so, yeah, I'm hoping this field day will address some of these concerns that we've had now, and we'll just continue to move forward.
Best of luck with the event, Mike. Thanks for the preview and for the update on canola in Kansas.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Eric.
Canola agronomist, Kansas State University. That's Mike Stamm. Again, K-State Research and Extension Canola Field Day tomorrow, 11 o'clock in the morning. Kingman County, due south of the community of Norwich. Look for the signs on Kansas Highway 2. Reserve your spot as soon as possible at the Kingman County Extension Office, 620-532-5131, 620-532-5131. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll be back after this break over the K-State Radio Network. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Welcome back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. As you've likely noticed, there's been a flurry of proposed tax legislation on Capitol Hill of late, and our guest now has been extraordinarily busy keeping track of this and trying to figure out how it affects farm and ranch, estate, and tax planning. We're joined once again by Roger McEowen, professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law. Roger is with us every other Wednesday right here. The latest entry into this array of proposed legislation, Roger, something called the Sensible Taxation and Equity Promotion Act. Well, give us the general gist of what this is getting at.
Well, I would probably name it something different than the name that it was given by the 5 senators that proposed it. But this was a proposal, and again, I want to be clear, this is not enacted legislation. This is what's being talked about in Washington, D.C. It's in the proposal stage, and then it's got to go through the whole process of going through committees and then being voted on by both bodies of Congress and then being signed into law. So it has a long path ahead of it. But basically, in a nutshell, Eric, what this does is change the rules with respect to capital gains, the timing of capital gains, the basis issue in terms of income tax basis, and when certain transfers will trigger those capital gains, whether they're outright transfers or transfers in trust. Bottom line is, if this were to become law in the shape that it is in right now, it means significant changes and significant impacts on and to estate plans and business plans and income tax planning for everyone, pretty much, in farms and ranches also.
It is, as one would anticipate, very involved, this legislation. As you listed through some of the direct impacts for agricultural producers here, what things stand out to you as keynotes, if you will, things that folks need to be aware of?
One of those in particular is the rule change with respect to capital gains. This would apply a capital gains rate at 39.6%. And remember, we're basically at 20% on capital gains right now, long-term capital gains. And if it's a passive gain, you add on another 3.8% tax as a result of Obamacare. So you get it up to 23.8. This would take it to 39.6. And if it's a passive gain, add on the 3.8 to that to get you to 43.4, if my math is right on that. Basically, that rate would apply after your first $1 million of capital gains. So capital gains up to $1 million are excluded from the higher rate, and then it would kick in on gains above that. Now, if we think of farmland in particular that is sold or is transferred to a trust, and we'll get into the timing of this in just a moment, there's a lot of farmland that has over $1 million of built-in gain. And, we have a lot of farmland in agriculture that's been held for decades at low basis in it, and it's gone up substantially in value over the last 40, 50 years, particularly if we think of a farmer that perhaps got into farming, bought farmland at the bottom in the early 1980s, and then has held that land for almost 40 years. You could see very significant gains. We take as an example, take an Iowa farm. Let's say someone bought it at the trough during the farm debt crisis of the 1980s and got that land for, let's say, $1,000 per acre. And now it's worth $8,000 per acre. So you have $7,000 of built-in gain per acre. An average size farm, 500, 600 acres in Iowa, you're going to be up over that $1 million threshold, and you're going to be taxed at basically a 40% rate on that gain. The rule that we've had forever, well, not forever, but for a very long time, is that we get to increase their basis equal to fair market value of the property at the time somebody dies. So if you die holding that land, your heirs would get that $7,000 or $8,000 fair market value amount for their income tax basis upon your death, and then they could sell it and not have to pay any capital gain tax on that. Well, that rule would be eliminated also under these proposals that are floating around D.C., and to get around the potential that the heir might not sell the property and just continue to hold it until they die and move it on to another generation without any capital gain tax, and wipe out that low basis again or any future appreciation. This bill changes the timing on the gain such that at the time of death, that untaxed appreciation in value would be taxed. In other words, we eliminate the step-up basis rule. So those are two things that are really, really important for our farmers and ranchers across the country.
Other effects here from this legislation, and we talk frequently about how producers might be working their assets into a trust and managing that to their benefit. Does this bill affect or disaffect trust planning in any way, Roger?
Yeah, it deals, what we first mentioned here just a moment ago was outright transfers and then transfers at death, but also transfers in trust. And so this would create a new section of the Internal Revenue Code. They're proposing creating Section 1261, which would impose gain recognition at the time an asset is transferred to a certain type of trust. Now, you could still create a trust for your spouse, and those types of trusts would not be subject to the transfer into trust being a taxable transfer. But basically, any other type of trust would be caught by this particular rule. Now, I'll tell you, there's a lot of what I would call lack of clarity in the drafting language of the proposal that's out there concerning transfers to what we call grantor trusts. And the way I read it is, if I give up all of my powers over the trust such that the body of the trust, the assets in the trust would not be included in my estate at death, then is the funding of the trust a taxable transfer or not? I don't know. That language is really not clear, because what it is saying there is gain recognition occurs at the time of transfers of assets into a non-grantor trust, such as an irrevocable trust, as well as a grantor trust, such as a revocable living trust, which are very popular, if the assets will not be included in my estate. Okay, if those assets will be included in the estate at death, there's apparently no gain until a triggering event occurs. But that's where the lack of clarity in the drafting language really creates a lot of confusion.
One feature that is pretty straightforward and eye-catching, you say, Roger, is that this act, this Sensible Taxation and Equity Promotion, or STEP Act, is retroactive to this past January, and that causes some complications as well.
It sure does from a planning standpoint. If this is going to be retroactively effective, the questions I get are, what can I, when I talk about this, well, what planning steps can I take now in case this is enacted? Well, if it's retroactive back to the beginning of this year, that wipes out pretty much all of the planning that we could possibly do in terms of let's go ahead and make gifts now. Let's use up exclusion amounts before the exclusion drops down. Let's make some gifts and cover it with present interest gift exclusion. That's another thing that's also being discussed in Washington, D.C. Well, if this becomes retroactively effective, we can't shift assets around. We can't get wealth out of our name. We can't take advantage of the current basis rules if this takes effect January 1 of this year. Will any of this become effective? I think some of it probably will. I don't think the STEP Act, as it's written right now, would sail through unchanged. And so it's very difficult to advise farmers and ranchers and other taxpayers as to what to do. I think we just have to be flexible in our estate plans and our estate planning documents. We use certain techniques to create that flexibility from a drafting standpoint, but that's really where we're at right now. And it's disheartening to a lot of people not knowing what might happen to them and not being able to really do much about it to plan for it.
You talk about some of those techniques in the blog article on this that you just wrote and posted, but it's obvious that farmers, ranchers, anybody with concerns about what's developing here, what may take place, need to be having a conversation with their tax and estate planning professionals.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I have talked to some farmers recently that are not paying any attention to any of this. They say, well, we're busy with our livestock. Right. It's springtime. We're getting ready to plant crops. Yeah, I understand that. I fully understand that. This is a hard slog to go through, but it is beneficial to you to try to read up on as much of this as you can so that you can raise some questions with your practitioners. And keep in mind, many practitioners are very busy at this time of year, particularly because of the extended tax season. If they're preparing returns, they're not really focused on this yet either. But we will have to adjust a lot of farm and ranch estate plans when we actually know what the rules are.
Again, reference this blog article. He's entitled it The Misstep Act, What It Means to Your Estate and Income Tax Plan at washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. Roger posted this just this past Monday. Thanks for the input on this, Roger. Always a pleasure. In 2 weeks, we'll talk once again.
Thank you, Rick.
Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation out of the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen, and this is Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
You're listening to Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson back with you. Time now for agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. The Kansas FFA just capped off its 2021 career development events in agriculture here at K-State. The competition in 7 categories took place last week, and the results were announced yesterday. We'd like to let you know here about the top placing chapters in each, as well as the top individual. So the contests in alphabetical order here. Dairy Cattle Evaluation, the top chapter, the Iola FFA. Burlington FFA in second, and the Yates Center chapter was in third. The high individual in dairy cattle from the St. Mary's FFA, Kaylee Lukert. The Floriculture CDE, the top chapter, was the Lewisburg FFA. Spring Hill chapter was second, and the Riverside FFA in third place. The top individual in the Floriculture CDE from the Spring Hill FFA, Alyssa Sharon. In the livestock, beg your pardon, before we get to that, in the horse evaluation CDE, the lead chapter, the Tonganoxie FFA, finishing first, Lawrence Free State in second, and the El Saline chapter was in third. And the high individual in the horse evaluation from the Lawrence Free State chapter, Ray Lynn Kiefer. Then to the livestock evaluation CDE, and there was a tie for first place in the team competition, and the scores were equal at 13-10 apiece. The tiebreaker, the total reasons score. So the top team in the livestock CDE, the Wamego FFA, West Elk in second, and the Fort Scott chapter was in third. And the top individual in the livestock evaluation CDE from the Stafford FFA, Preston Dunn. On to the meats CDE then. The top chapter was the Uniontown FFA in first place, second going to Eureka FFA, and the Anderson County chapter was in third. The top individual in the meats CDE from the Scott City chapter, Landon Trout. In the nursery and landscape CDE then, the Ottawa FFA in first, Lewisburg finishing second, and the Chapman chapter in third. The top individual in the nursery and landscape CDE from the Ottawa chapter, Chloe Dillon. And in the poultry evaluation CDE then, your top chapter was the Lewisburg FFA, Anderson County in second, and the Paola FFA was in third. The Lewisburg chapter featured the top individual as well, Lola Edwards, in the poultry CDE. Those were the results from this year's Kansas FFA Career Development Events in Agriculture, or CDEs, as they're called, which just concluded here at Kansas State University, and our congratulations to all. Tractor sales continued their year-long upward swing in the month of April, according to the Association of Equipment Manufacturers in their monthly tractor and combine retail report released yesterday. For the month, all farm tractor sales were up just over 22.5% over April of 2020. The tractor retail market led by sales of units 40 horsepower and under. During April, manufacturers sold 30,000 tractors under 40 horse, compared to 25,000 in April of last year. Tractor sales in the 40 to 100 horsepower range rose to 7,700 last month, compared to just shy of 6,000 in April of 2020. Sales of two-wheel drive tractors 100 horsepower and above were also strong, 2,300 units sold last month, compared to 1,700 in April of last year. Overall, tractor sales for the first 4 months of 2021, 103,000 units. That was sold compared to 74,000 units sold for the same period last year, a 39% increase, according to the AEM. Four-wheel drive tractor sales up as well by 15% in April over April of last year. Actual four-wheel drive sales amounting to 320 last month compared to 280 in April of 2020. For the year, January through April of this year, combine sales are up just shy of 9%, about 115 units over the same 4-month span in 2020. The application deadline is nearing for a prestigious conservation award. Scarlett Hagens tells us here that farmers, ranchers, and other private landowners who focus on conserving natural resources qualify to apply.
The application deadline is June 1st for the 2021 Kansas Leopold Conservation Award, which is presented by Rangeland Trust of Kansas, Sand County Foundation, and the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. Given in honor of renowned conservationist Aldo Leopold, the $10,000 award honors Kansas farmers, ranchers, and other private landowners who inspire others with their dedication to stewardship of the land, water, soil, and wildlife in their care. Landowners are encouraged to nominate themselves, or applications may be submitted on behalf of a landowner. The application can be found at sandcountyfoundation.org. Submitted applications are reviewed by an independent panel of agricultural and conservation leaders. The Leopold Conservation Award Program is active in 22 states, with the award being given to private landowners for their extraordinary achievement in voluntary conservation. In Kansas, the program is made possible thanks to generous sponsors, including Evergy, Farm Credit Associations of Kansas, ITC Great Plains, Kansas Department of Agriculture's Division of Conservation, Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, Kansas Forest Service, McDonald's, the Nature Conservancy in Kansas, USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, and a Kansas Leopold Conservation Award recipient. I'm Scarlett Hagans.
And want to take a moment right here to remind you once again that K-State Research and Extension will be hosting its Spring Crops Field Day in person a week from today at the Southeast Research and Extension Center just outside of Parsons. It'll start with registration at 8:30 that morning. The tour itself will roll at 9 o'clock. It'll include a look at wheat variety plots, 41 varieties on display. K-State wheat breeder Alan Fritz will be aboard to discuss those on site. Also a look at controlling Fusarium head blight in wheat, the timing and formulation of those fungicide applications. K-State's Kelsey Anderson Onofre will be on board for that. And cover crops, soil health, and weed control to be discussed by K-State's Anita Dilley. Lastly, Bruno Pedreria of K-State, the regional agronomist just appointed there, on pasture fertility and weed control. The lunch is sponsored. They're asking you to pre-register for that purpose. Do so by calling the Southeast Research and Extension Center, 620-820-6131, 620-820-6131. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
Of course, it will take some maintenance.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
There's nothing I can do about the coronavirus. Oh, I take precautions. I wear my face mask when I'm in town and on campus. I wash my hands. It has become a habit. And yes, both my wife and I have been vaccinated. I have friends and family who have not. They all have their reasons. As we say, it is a free country. There's nothing I can do about the virus. However, what I can do is make a suggestion. I suggest, with spring having arrived, to make the most of it and create your own very special corner in your home landscape to withdraw. Not lock yourself up. I'm looking at our deck, and your deck, or patio, or even a balcony. I'm not talking about the whole yard, although if you had that much energy, go for it. Your home is your castle, and that includes the yard. I no longer have the energy to work the whole yard with the extensive flower border and flowering shrubs. Old age has some advantages. It's a fair excuse. But the deck and the entrance arbor are a different matter. My suggestion is to create color with containers on your deck. Of course, it will take some maintenance. You will need to water, and there may be some deadheading to be done. But your reward is a beautiful corner on your deck or patio. There are lots of books on the subject. They are a tease. All have beautiful color photos. There are extension publications on the subject to help you along and to make it a success. There's nothing as disappointing as a container with a shriveled up plant to look at. To achieve the success and the wow reaction, start thinking. To help plants like mandevilla or nasturtium to climb, place standing wire behind the plant. Allow it to grow up against the wall or along the railing. I have a beautiful honeysuckle growing along the railing of the deck. It is planted in the ground, but reaches up and is strained. It's blooming. Beautiful. So you can make good use of the ground under and beside the deck. Another plant which is planted in the ground and is strained to the railing is clematis. They all add color and invite the hummingbird. These two growing at ground level I have very little to do with. I train them. They take care of themselves. They are background for the containers I place in front. If you look for containers, make sure they are large, deep and wide. I now have containers when filled with soil I cannot lift anymore. So I use a dolly, the best investment I made years ago. To load and hold a big container on a dolly is an art. Hold the container and tip the dolly so that it carries the container. Of course, you can place the container and bring the soil. Think shape where you use containers. Wide and deep, round like a bowl, or tall. Years ago, I handled half whiskey barrels. Fantastic, but no more. Today, there are fiberglass and other lightweight materials, and the containers are quite attractive in a variety of colors. Remember, they need to be big for roots to grow, and they need to have holes so that excess water can drain, unless you plan to grow rice as an ornamental grass. When I used the whiskey barrels, I drilled holes along the lower sides so that there always was moisture in the bottom. Yes, I love the terracotta pots, but they are heavy. When filling the containers, use good soil. Many years ago, I amended soil with plenty of pony manure. I had plenty collected over the winter when horses were home. I don't have the horses anymore. But I do mix my own soil and add organic matter to make it hold water. If you have 2 parts of sandy loam, 1 part sphagnum moss, and 1 part coarse sand, it will make a good mix. You can buy it, but read the bag, and you can always add perlite. As far as fertilizer, a frequent, light application is better than too much at once. You need water, soluble fertilizer. And remember, too much can kill the plants. Some people build redwood or red cedar flower boxes. The advantage is you can build the wooden container long enough. The narrow and shallow troughs bought at stores are no good. Having said all this, you must keep in mind the exposure you give your plants in containers. Is it shaded? Half shade? Sunny? Windy? Those are common sense factors. But be aware, you want success. Go for the wow. To get that wow, you do not always need the colorful blooms. This year, I have incorporated many leafy caladiums for a shaded area. They have colorful leaves in many varieties. I use an assortment to replace the 70 or so geraniums which froze last winter when we had that sudden cold spell, and I forgot to turn up the heat in my greenhouse. There are many plants to select from for containers. Do not mix those who need more water with those who don't in the same pot. Same for sun and shade. A short list is marigolds, vinca, geraniums, impatiens ageratum, begonias, lobelia, ivy, mandevilla, sweet potato, verbena, petunia, and more. And don't forget the hanging baskets. I'm going to sit on my deck and enjoy.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. And that'll do it for a Wednesday edition. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.